So why do mistakes always happen when people are buying property? Not always though, most of the time, but they do happen. Why do they happen? Why is it that buyers often make mistakes when they're purchasing a property? Well, the first reason I can talk about is the fact that during that time, people get so excited. They've just been approved that they're going to get a bond. They can be able to purchase a property. They're going to have a property that has their name on it. It will come in a title deed. This is obviously exciting. For a lot of people, it's an achievement. But because they are feeling that type of way and they are so excited, in their dealings, when they're trying to find a property now and conclude on the sale, they make so many mistakes because they are led by what? But by how they are feeling and their anxiousness to actually own and finally have this property, in their name. This is why I even say to my people in business that whenever it is that you feel too excited, try to get somebody else on board who has some form of objectivity, because it's at this point that you're going to make mistakes. Because why? You are led by how you are feeling, and the other party is not. They are on par with what they're doing. So this is also something that buyers need to start, familiarizing themselves with, that you need to get somebody else who's got some form of objectivity to guide you so that you don't make mistakes. And as you know, property mistakes are often costly. So let's not even dwell too much on that and talk about the process that I say will help you steer clear from making these mistakes when you're doing what? When you're buying property. All right. So to the people that are new here, hello. My name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. It's nice to see you here. We're hoping you're going to join us for the longest of time, but just be sure to come back. We always create content that is helpful for most of us. All right, so where do I say you need to start? And what's the next process or the next step of the process? And where should the process end, particularly on the perspective of the buyer? Let's go. So what's the first thing you're going to do now? You've decided you want to buy a house and you know that you're going to be approved somehow. So what do you do now? So now you start looking for the property, right? You start looking for where you ideally want to stay. Do you want to buy into a sectional title, or do you prefer standalone? If it's a sectional title, do your investigations in terms of levies. Are people paying? Is everything in accordance? Because once people don't pay levies in a sectional title, that becomes an issue, particularly if you're a buyer, you're going to stay there. But that's a story for another day. So also you want to understand the levies, to what extent do they go up to, right? So try to do your investigations if you can get access to this information at this point. Also, obviously, you're looking at the area. Is it nice? Is it what you're looking for? Understand what you're buying into, because a buy is permanent, guys. This is where you're going to live most of the time with your family. So you want comfort. So find this for yourself. Now, let's say you've now found the property. What then do you do next? So next, obviously, you're going to reach out to an agent or a seller. You want to look at the property. You're interested. When you're going to view that property, you don't go alone. You tag along a certain someone. Who do you tag along? You tag along someone we call a structural builder. You want the person to have a structural view of the actual structure, if that makes sense. Because me and you, because we're not builders, we don't see what builders can see. If I see a crack, I won't see anything to it more than it's just a crack. But a builder can tell you that this one is going to be problematic, in the future, so it needs to be taken care of. They can be able to pinpoint if a property has a lot of structural issues, also advising you and also helping you to be able to negotiate the right kind of terms and the right kind of price for such a property that has such issues, right? Because believe you me, if you hear from people who have bought properties that had structural issues, they ended up spending so much money afterwards, because then those things that they thought were minimal ended up being huge things. So this is why I say go with a structural builder, so that they can tell you what the property is and whether or not you should be concerned about the structure. So now we move on to the next step. So now you bought this property, you have an interest. So what you're going to do, you're obviously going to reach out to the seller and the agent, alternatively, and say, listen, I'm interested. I want to buy this property. Then what should happen ideally next is that the agent must send you the contract. Okay, so let's stop right here. This is where a lot of people make mistakes. They indicate an interest and then they are called in to sign, and then they just sign the offer to purchase. This is where they make the mistakes, because the person, number one, will not read that contract, will not necessarily understand even the legal jargon that's happening there if they try to read it. And mind you, they'll be under pressure because the agent would be saying, listen, quickly sign here so I can go check with the banks. Okay, stop right there. What you do when you are here, you are indicating an interest. You ask for the contract. In fact, once you have indicated that you are interested, ideally what should happen is that the agent or the seller should send you a contract. And you have to read it. Now, because obviously this is a legal document and you want to make sure that your interests are protected, this is where your legal practitioner comes in. You're going to talk to them. This is the discussion you had with the agent. Is it what is written on that piece of paper? Are my interests protected? Is there anything I should be thinking about? Your legal practitioner is going to read that contract, interpret it for you, and tell you if there's anything missing from what you discussed with the agent or how it has been relayed in the contract. Right? Then from there, you then take the next step, which is you go back to the agent either with a signed contract because your legal practitioner has said it is safe, it's okay, all of the terms are there, all of your interests are protected. You can take it back to them, you can sign it, then they move ahead. Alternatively, if there's anything missing, particularly if you had a discussion about it and it's not there and it's going to affect you and your interests, you don't sign. You take it back to the agent or the seller and you tell them, listen, I'm concerned 1, 2, 3, 4 is not in the contract and I want it to be phrased this way or in the way in which we discussed. It's during this time as well that you also need to be mindful, because another person would say, either an agent or a seller, that it's all right, we'll take care of it. We don't need to be putting it in a contract. It must be in a contract. Remember, property purchases are governed not by verbal discussions and contracts. They are governed strictly by a contract. So you need to have every detail on that piece of paper. So you're asking them now, fix it, add this and that, then revert the contract to me once more so that me and my legal practitioner can have a look at it, and then if you're satisfied, you sign it. If they refuse to add certain things, then I think you should be able to make a decision on that basis, right? So once you've now signed and given them back the contract, that's when you now have to source what you're sourcing, utilizing that offer to purchase. That's if you're taking care of this on your own. You're sourcing for funding for this particular property. Again, it's critical before you go source for funding, before you even go sign the contract, that you understand to what extent you're willing to have a debt on your interest, or to have interest on the principal debt that you're going to get. And this is something you also have to include in your contract as well, because there often is a condition in the OTP that you need to go get approval. And if you get approval, that's a go-ahead on our part to go ahead with the transfer, the sale. And if you dare go back and say, let's say you're not comfortable or happy with the interest, you're not going to be able to cancel because you did not include something to this effect in the contract. So you need to know to what extent you're willing to, accept interest, so that if you get an offer from the bank and the interest is not something you are okay with, you can then be able to say to the seller, I'm going to go out of this transaction. Unfortunately, because the interest that I was given in that particular or at that particular bank is not necessarily ideal for me, and the contract then allows you to escape from that situation. But you can't raise this issue when it wasn't discussed, when it wasn't in the contract. A lot of people try to do this and say, but the interest I'm getting on the loan, it's not that I'm not being approved. I am being approved, but the problem I'm having is the fact that they're adding too much interest. Did you include that in the contract, that you're going to have a cap in terms of interest so that you can be able to get out of this contract? Because now you won't be able to. If you try to do so, it will come with costs. Do you understand? So yeah, so now you go to the bank, you get the loan. Once you're approved, you send all of that to the agent. If you're taking care of this, then the process of transfer will resume. There's often going to be documents that you're going to have to sign depending on the type of sale that you are in, and then the transfer process will resume. So the transfer process is simply, that the seller's name now has to be removed from that property so that yours can be reflected, because you're now going to be the ultimate owner of the property. So once you get here, you can be at least a bit happy, because you know that the most important things have been taken care of. So now you're dealing with only the property transfer. And just to add, good people, when you're going to buy into a property as well, I just say to you, in terms of viewing, or when you're viewing, during that time, you must also do some due diligence in addition about the actual ownership and the living arrangements of the property. What's going on? Is this a family house? Are there any disputes or feuds that at least you need to be aware of? Is it a deceased estate? Are people disgruntled? What is going on? Just understand a bit, especially if you're going to buy into a family home, right? You just want to understand the nitty-gritties, because sometimes, even though a person might be the lawful owner of a property and lawfully sell the property to you, you might have issues when it comes to taking occupation of the property because of the family squabbles or the family issues. So you just want to understand as well, what is going on with this property? Yes, I see this person is the owner, but is there anything that I just need to be aware of? Is it necessary, for me to probe further here? This will save you. And if you've watched our videos in the past, you'll see why this is very important. Guys, on that note, let me see you some other time. I hope this was helpful. This was just a brief guide as to where you need to start, what you need to consider, and, so that you don't make the mistakes that a lot of the buyers make. And like I said, have a legal practitioner for this kind of transaction as a buyer, right? So that, number one, the excitement doesn't overwhelm the whole situation and you end up making mistakes. And also so that everything that you want in terms of terms and conditions is going to be reflected accordingly on the contract. Because believe you me, trying to enforce something that someone told you verbally in a property transaction is going to be the most difficult thing you try to do. And in most instances, you will not succeed. So on that basis, we'll see you next time. Guys, share this video to others so that they can also get some education. We'll see you next time.